Nothing in life trains you for the moment you recognize your partner's voice calling out another person's name inside the home you built together. I was standing barefoot in the narrow corridor of my own house, phone shaking in my palm, recording the collapse of nearly a decade without fully understanding how my body was still upright. The bedroom door ahead of me was not fully closed, just open enough for the yellow glow of the bedside lamp to spill into the hall and outline two moving shapes that should never have existed together. Lee's head tilted back. Mark's hands were locked around her hips. The framed photo from our wedding sat inches away on the nightstand, frozen smiles watching something obscene unfold beneath them. Weeks earlier, the shift had begun quietly. Messages that once came in full paragraphs became clipped replies. Late nights turned into a routine excuse. Showers grew longer, steam-filled, and she would come out flushed and distant, brushing past me with claims of exhaustion whenever I reached for her. I swallowed every explanation because believing lies felt easier than facing the alternative. I booked dinners she canceled minutes before start time. I memorized apologies that weren't mine. And all the while, his name crept into conversations under the disguise of professionalism, introduced as guidance, support, mentorship. I see now that the language was camouflage, and I was too invested in the marriage to question it. The unease had been growing inside me for weeks, not sharp enough to act on, but heavy enough to poison every quiet moment. I told myself it was stress, work, travel, distance that came naturally with time. That lie broke the night I returned early from a conference I was supposed to attend for 2 more days. I had imagined surprising her, imagined maybe repairing whatever had felt off between us. I parked in the garage, unlocked the door like I always had, and heard them before I saw them. Soft sounds, the mattress complaining under weight, her voice saying his name with a familiarity that sliced straight through my chest. I moved closer without thinking. A floorboard groaned beneath me, but they didn't notice. They were lost in each other, oblivious to the husband standing less than an arm's length away, documenting their betrayal. Mark's wedding band flashed under the lamp as his fingers tangled in her hair. Married. Of course he was. Lee had met his wife at corporate events, shared wine, laughed politely. Rage pressed against my ribs, demanding noise, violence, chaos. I ignored it. I let the phone record. I waited. Evidence before emotion. When I finally stepped forward, the room froze, sheets twisted. Mark scrambled back, eyes wild. Lee stared at me like she'd been caught mid-fall with no ground beneath her. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I slid the phone into my pocket and told them both to get dressed and leave my house. Mark tried to speak, some half-formed explanation tumbling out of him, and the sound triggered something ancient and ugly inside me. My fist connected with his jaw before I registered the movement. He crashed into the dresser, knocking picture frames to the floor. Lee screamed. Mark tasted blood and fear at the same time. I told him he had a few minutes to disappear before I called his wife and then the police. He didn't argue. He fled with his shirt in his hands and dignity left behind. Lee wrapped herself in the sheet, crying, begging to explain. I told her it wasn't over, not even close, and walked out. I drove aimlessly until the heat of adrenaline cooled into something denser. The man who entered that hallway didn't survive it. Someone colder took his place, someone capable of finishing what betrayal had started. I spent the night at a roadside cafe that never closed, the kind of place where exhaustion and bad decisions were regular customers. The waitress didn't ask questions. She poured coffee and let silence do its work. My phone buzzed nonstop. Lee's name lit the screen again and again. Calls turned into messages, apologies layered over denial, love declarations wrapped around excuses. Each one confirmed what I already knew. The person I had been would have gone home. He would have begged for clarity, taken responsibility for pain that wasn't his, and tried to salvage something already dead. That man was gone. I opened my laptop instead. I logged into every account we shared. I tracked months of spending that didn't belong to me. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, purchases meant for someone else. Her devices synced automatically, a convenience she once insisted on. Now they betrayed her. Messages stretched back farther than I wanted to know. Photos I didn't open, patterns I couldn't ignore. By sunrise, the story was complete. 4 months of lies, 4 months of sleeping beside someone who had already left. I contacted my attorney before the city fully woke up. I kept my voice steady as I explained what I had, what I wanted, and how fast it needed to move. He listened without interruption, then asked if I was sure. I said yes without hesitation. Once I would have hesitated. Once I would have believed time and effort could mend anything. But you can't repair something that was deliberately dismantled. I went back to the house later that morning. Lee was gone. I stripped the bed, removed anything that reminded me of shared space, and replaced it with emptiness. My phone buzzed again, this time from Mark. He wanted to talk. He claimed things didn't have to escalate. I deleted the message. He was wrong. It had already escalated the moment he stepped into my marriage. Over the next few days, I learned everything about him. His professional image was spotless. Awards, leadership posts, public praise for integrity. Behind it, patterns emerged. Retreat photos where his hands lingered. Testimonials from former employees who had left quietly. Lee wasn't unique. She was convenient. I edited the recording carefully. I blurred her face, not out of mercy, but because this was larger than her. The audio remained untouched, clear, indisputable. I compiled timelines, expense reports, travel overlaps, late-night communications. Then I sent it anonymously to the people paid to care. Human resources, legal oversight, executive review. I wrote like someone with nothing to gain and nothing to fear. I sent it before dawn on a weekday, before excuses could be prepared. By the end of that week, rumors moved faster than facts. Meetings were canceled. Calls went unanswered. Lee texted in panic, asking if I had done something. I didn't reply. On Friday afternoon, Mark resigned effective immediately. His online presence vanished. A company memo followed about policy reinforcement. Lee showed up unannounced days later, hollow-eyed and furious, accusing me of destruction. I told her calmly that consequences aren't destruction. They're outcomes. I closed the door and let silence answer the rest. What followed wasn't driven by anger. It was deliberate, precise. With my lawyer's guidance, I separated finances legally, moving only what was mine to move. Oversight became leverage. She received the divorce papers at work in front of colleagues who would whisper without needing details. She called screaming about abuse. I corrected her language. Courts understand definitions. Screenshots don't argue. Evidence doesn't negotiate. I shared selected truths with the people who would inevitably ask why our life collapsed. Not to punish, but to clarify. Lies thrive in darkness. I turned on the lights. The fallout was swift. Her support system fractured. Friends distanced themselves. Family called with disappointment thick in their voices. Lee tried to rewrite the story, casting herself as confused, manipulated, a victim of circumstance. Even in letters begging for forgiveness, she minimized what she had done, reducing months of deception into a single error. That final attempt confirmed what I had already accepted. She didn't miss me. She missed what I provided: stability, safety, image. I shredded the letter without ceremony. 6 weeks after the papers were served, she appeared at my apartment late one night, thinner, exhausted, unfamiliar. I let her in against better judgment. She tried to explain again. I told her the truth didn't require interpretation. She said she thought she loved me. That was the moment everything ended. Thought is not love. Love doesn't hide. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't choose another person repeatedly and call it an accident. I asked her to leave and not return. She hesitated, then obeyed. I listened to her footsteps fade and felt nothing but relief. I rebuilt my life quietly after that night, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through small, deliberate choices that stacked on top of each other until the past no longer had leverage over me. The divorce finalized sometime in late autumn, the paperwork arriving in a thick envelope stamped and signed by people who had never met us, but now held the authority to declare our marriage legally extinct. I sat alone at my kitchen table when I opened it, sunlight cutting across the wood in sharp lines, and felt something unexpected settle in my chest. Not sadness, not relief either. It was clarity. The kind that arrives when a long argument finally ends and silence takes its place. I signed where required, returned the documents, and poured myself a drink without ceremony. The future wasn't bright or dark in that moment. It was empty. And emptiness, I learned, can be a gift if you know how to use it. Lee's professional life unraveled faster than I anticipated, though part of me had known it would. The industry she once navigated with confidence suddenly had a long memory and a short tolerance for scandal. Her title vanished first, then her network. By the time winter settled in, she was working a job that demanded politeness from strangers who never thanked her for it, earning just enough to survive and not enough to forget what she had lost. I didn't celebrate that outcome, but I didn't mourn it either. She made choices in private that created consequences in public. That equation doesn't change based on regret. Mark disappeared even more thoroughly. His wife relocated with their children to another state, filings followed, and his carefully built reputation collapsed into a cautionary tale told quietly at conferences. The last rumor I heard placed him far from boardrooms and influence, selling promises he could no longer deliver to people who didn't know his name. I didn't seek updates. They found me anyway, carried by people who thought I might care. Professionally, my own life shifted in ways that felt almost unfair. Without the constant tension of a failing marriage draining my focus, my work sharpened. Projects moved faster. Decisions came easier. Within a year, I accepted a role that required relocation, one that offered more responsibility and less noise. I moved into a modest home with clean lines and no shared history, choosing furniture that fit my taste alone. The quiet there felt earned, not lonely. Friends asked if I was seeing anyone, their voices careful, like doctors checking stitches. I told them no and meant it. Healing, I discovered, isn't passive. It requires space. It requires refusing to replace one dependency with another just to avoid discomfort. I learned how to sit with myself without distraction, how to enjoy routines that belonged solely to me, how to wake up without anticipating someone else's moods. Lee tried to reach out again months later, this time through intermediaries, requesting what she called closure. The word made me smile in spite of myself. Closure is something people ask for when they're unwilling to accept an ending that doesn't flatter them. I declined politely and without explanation. There was nothing left to clarify. The truth had already been documented, processed, and filed away where it could no longer be rewritten. She forgave me, apparently, for the damage my response had caused to her affair partner's life. The irony was almost impressive. Even then, she needed a narrative where she remained morally intact. I let her keep it. Stories people tell themselves are rarely improved by interference. On weekends, I drove out of the city to a lake not far from my new place. I didn't fish or swim. I sat on the dock with a thermos of coffee and watched the water move without urgency, letting thoughts come and go without grabbing hold of them. Sometimes I remembered the man I had been before everything collapsed. He was earnest. He believed consistency could substitute for honesty, that love meant endurance at any cost. I didn't hate him. I understood him. He existed because he wanted to believe the best in someone he loved. That version of me served a purpose once. He simply stayed past his expiration date. The version of me that remained was quieter, more selective. Trust became something earned slowly instead of assumed freely. I paid attention to patterns instead of promises. When people spoke, I listened not just to their words but to what they avoided. This didn't make me cynical. It made me precise. I still believed in connection, in loyalty, in love that didn't require self-erasure. I just no longer confused potential with reality. If anything, the experience refined my standards instead of lowering them. Pain can either harden you or clarify you. I chose clarity. Occasionally, memories surfaced without warning. A shared joke, a vacation photo, a song that once meant something different. I didn't push them away. I let them pass like weather. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without bleeding. I no longer felt the urge to explain my past to new people or justify my boundaries. Those who needed explanations weren't meant to stay. Those who respected them didn't ask. Work offered another relocation opportunity not long after, this time farther west, closer to mountains than water. I accepted immediately. Movement felt right. Each new place carried fewer standing. They end with acceptance that understanding isn't required. Closure doesn't come from the other person. It comes from deciding you're done asking questions that won't change the answer. Now, when my phone vibrates with another opportunity or invitation, I choose carefully. I no longer confuse attention with value or urgency with importance. Silence has become a tool instead of a threat. It gives me space to think, to decide, to move forward without dragging the past behind me like proof of endurance. I didn't rebuild my life to prove anything to anyone. I rebuilt it because peace is expensive, and I was finally willing to pay the cost.